This is episode 45, and I think as we're nearing the, you know, half, 100, as it were, I'm coming to be aware, thanks to mostly our patrons over in the Discord server, that there's like a lore. There's lore that's built around the show.
Mhm.
Like there's like lore about hobbies, about things that we've done, stuff I forgot we mentioned in like the patron exclusive Q&As. And then people come back and are like, "Oh my God, this reminds me of that moment that like Salt did this or whatever like that, or Key broke into that place, with his lock picking kit." And one of the things that has been on the lore is our continual like Sisyphean wrestling with the gym. And how all three of us love going to the gym, right? But like for very different reasons and very different vibes. And I was the last to accept the baptism of the iron, of the sweat, of the tears. I was never necessarily a gym girl, but this year, in the year of our Lord 2024, is the year I have become a gym girl. And people know that there's this like mysterious person who shows up at my house and drives me to the gym and like makes sure I have my protein shake and will even make sure I have like immune boosting herbs and like a good tea to drink afterwards. And then will like tell me, 2 more reps. And when I finish those reps, we'll be like, I lied, I said one more and then lie again and say one more. And like this has been like a known thing and nobody knows who this person is, except now you will today because she's right here with us to talk to us about Chinese astrology of all things, actually, because that is her specialty. So here is none other than Maria, a fellow dragon lady. I may be the dragon cunning, but she's the green dragon healer on the Instagram, on the website. And it's such a pleasure to have you, having only seen you but the other day when we were destroying our cores.
Yeah, when I was like, by the way, we're going to do a burnout, and yeah, you're not going to
I
be able to walk after
know.
this.
Oh,
Well,
it's so funny
she's
when
like, "Oh, you like serpents? Time to crawl like one, bitch."
the we're doing a superset. Let's go.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is because Keith will visit us very frequently because Marie and I are actually neighbors, and he'll come up and be like, "Great, I'm gonna do like a week's worth of magic, and we're gonna do cemeteries, we're gonna cook, we're gonna do a bunch of stuff, we're gonna make some charms, we're gonna bury some materia," and then Maria comes by and is like, "Get in the fucking car, we're going to play fucking LA Fitness stuff."
It's
You're going to do
so
some
good.
bench pressing instead.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
Oh man,
yeah.
it was really funny too because the last time that we all went to the gym together, I'm like, oh, we're actually going hard today. Okay, fuck it, let's do this.
yeah, like he's like, I don't expect you ladies to have this kind of routine.
He didn't expect it at all. And to be honest, we don't know how to go easy. We just have one mode and it's hard mode.
Mhm.
That's it. So
This is good shit.
um
Yeah, because like it's not only a good set, but it's also supersets. We were actually like lifting real weight. Like I don't know what you had in mind, but like people again, lore mode, but like Key Salt were both jocks back in the day and are rapidly ascending back into their jockdom. And one of the things that has been happening is well, and listen, you've told us your stories of when you were almost scouted for a nationals team in rowing.
Mhm.
And so like, and I know you did oh, this is gonna be like a psychological profile of you. Like the three big sports that you did were rowing, lacrosse, and Greco-Roman wrestling. I
Mhm.
listen, I my pattern recognition may be poor, but I know a top when I see one.
Definitely gives a certain amount of information, right?
Yeah. But it's been great. And so now that we're hitting the gym again, God forbid that you miss a day because Maria will be in your Discord DMs. Like what?
Mhm. Maria is in my dreams, dude. It's even worse than Discord DMs. I'm like, I'm waking up and I'm like, oh fuck, did I just do that set? Why am I like in pain? I gotta go do it IRL now. Fuck.
yeah, it's we just gotta keep you guys motivated. That's all. We're just keeping each other motivated and accountable.
Yeah, the accountability is that like she's doing like the kind of like PGM like sleep spells where you like enter someone's dreams or send them a dream. You except like it just ends up with you having to go to Planet Fitness or
Mhm.
having to go
That's
to LA
right.
Fitness, yeah.
It's evil sleep the way that I'm dying after every set.
Yeah.
Evil Sleep is one of the best categories of Magic, just for the name.
Mhm. That and spell for indeterminate purpose.
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. I agree. Be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Svinga and wait, why are you like this again?
Because I have a double opposing key.
I was like, the fuck does that mean? That was okay, like we right before we started recording, Key was like, it can be Batsa Key, right? I'm like, no, it cannot be. It's literally in the name of the episode, you piece of shit. No. Absolutely not. But the good news is, you will find out what a double opposing is shortly. But before we get to there, remember to check us out at twitter.com/frightful and patreon.com/the frightful howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and for just our patrons. We have a Discord server where you can share your fitness routines. There is a muscle mancy channel. There's also a kitchen witchin channel, which is just really good recipes we can share all the time. And a lot of stuff besides magic. It's a good time. We have Salt's Fantastic Almanac, a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing. I think this month's is going to be some of the known grimoire stuff from When We're Tall. We
Oh
have
yeah.
show notes, oh yeah, for every episode and lots more. And also, please, please, please remember to give us a like, rating, and review on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you may be listening to us. This is the one main way that we can all like charge the beam. You know when Goku is doing the Spirit Bomb in Dragon Ball Z? Like this lets you charge the Spirit Bomb with us. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing until we can fire it and obliterate the demiurge of the algorithm once and for all. Like if you are in the giving spirit because of the holidays coming up, this is the number one way to help us besides subscribing to the Patreon because it costs you nothing.
Please offer me your energy. I ask of you, please.
Also, thank you so much for everyone who donated to the candle service.
Yeah, we had a goal for how much we wanted to do to donate to our Kabbalah, maybe like to Loki and Gila, and in order to help our Kabbalah Gated furnace. And it ended up like being that we made that amount the first day. So thank you so much. Every dollar we donated to the temple, and it's thanks to people like you that you're able to both help us nourish our Kimanda community for Ki and I, and also help us nourish the Fightful Howls community, all of you lovely people, by giving you some magic for the holiday as well.
So thank you all. Thank you, thank you,
Mhm.
thank you.
Lastly, remember to hit us up on social media. I'm at Dragon Cunning on Instagram. Salt is at SaltC and C, and Key is at barnowl.key.
And today, as we mentioned at the outset, we have a fantastic guest, close personal friend of both of ours, Maria.
Maria the Green Dragon Healer, welcome, welcome. Salt's gonna be kicking himself that he couldn't make it for this one. Unfortunately, he's not available right now, but it's truly a pleasure to be able to like chat about Chinese metaphysics, and I'm sure you'll be on for another episode of that in the future, so you and him can go band for band on Taoism. But for now, our topic is Batsa, which I'm super excited to discuss with you because as you guys know, we have three kinds of episodes. One is an informative jaunt through folklore of some kind, or discussing a particular lineage or type of spirit or a particular kind of magic. We have our practicums, which are more about teaching magic or explaining how to do things or giving tips and advice. And then we have our guest features. And our rule with guest features is they have to be personal friends. Now, one of the things about that is they also have to be good at what they do because we have a lot of friends and, people have different skill levels and not everyone necessarily has something that they're comfortable sharing or in a place where they can share. Like we know some really amazing people who we'd happily have on, but they are very humble and are like, wait, give me 3 more years to train in this before I'm ever willing to speak about it publicly. And even most recently with having our Tata on, like Kimanda is something that you and I are both junior priests in, Ki, we didn't really want to speak about publicly in any measure despite having already spent a lot of time in that system. So it's one of those things that like I think it's really important to know that it's who we platform is also a matter of personal trust in who they are as an individual and their ethics, and also in their craft. And so having both of us receive readings in Batsa from Maria, this is a real pleasure and a treat because it's really nothing like a reading that we've had in other astrological forms before. So, Maria, we're gonna give you the floor for a little bit to just kind of chat about how what you're up to and what all this is, if people don't really know. And then we can talk a little bit about your lineage, your training, your licensing, what a Batsa reading involves, what are the talismans that you can make to help remediate astrological deficiencies in a chart, and just talk a little bit about Chinese medicine probably at the end, if that sounds good with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit who you are. I mean, we know who you are. You made us cry. On the white
Yeah.
bench. You're like, oh, we'll do regular Scots and we'll do good mornings. And I'm like, no.
We will do all the different variations of squats.
We will do
Yeah.
every Eastern European named workout.
Why are all the Eastern European named exercises the worst ones? I don't know. Anyways.
I have my theories, but I will not disclose them in public. As the serp in the chat, I will simply refrain.
We'll refrain from that. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for having me on. I'm kind of one of those people I think that has taken some time to be like, I'm not ready yet. I feel like I'm not ready yet. Now I'm ready. I've been training in classical Chinese medicine for over a decade now. And the way I kind of came into Chinese medicine was an interesting story as well. So I was really sick as a teenager, had an autoimmune condition, and Western medicine kind of failed me. Yeah, I met an acupuncturist, a Chinese master at the time, and I didn't realize he was quite a special man. When I met him, I went and saw him, and he was like, "Yeah, I can fix this, no problem. You come see me." I, of course, thought he was full of it and went and did another surgery. And then after finding out, having done this surgery again, that they didn't know what to do with me. So I went and saw him, and after 6 months, I was completely healed. And so my journey kind of started there, being a personal health journey. And I started getting I was always interested in martial arts. So I did martial arts growing up as a kid. But I started to understand that Chinese medicine, Chinese astrology, all these pieces kind of just spoke to me. Flash forward years later, I had gone to university. I was doing something completely different. I kept meditating, and every time I would kind of be in these trance states, I would be seeing myself doing hands-on healing. And I was like, what is this? Why does this keep coming up? And I tried to ask my spirits to talk to me about this. And I kept seeing this one spirit that I didn't really know, like I didn't have like a relationship with. And I then, of course, seeking answers, went and did an ayahuasca ceremony. And in that ceremony, it was like, it smacked me in the face, was like, this spirit came through really, really intensely and was like, you need to learn Chinese medicine. So the next morning I got on the phone and I called the master that had healed me and asked him if he could train me. And he said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. But you live in Canada, which means you have to go to school first, unfortunately. So you have to go and get licenses. So I went on that journey, and I went to school for Chinese medicine. Not that I practice that type of TCM really anymore. I do more classical based Chinese medicine, but I am trained and licensed in all these fun things as well. So I started training. I kind of trained through school, and then I found a teacher. Her name is Dr. Suzanne Robideau. She is an amazing teacher. She's actually originally from Canada, and she left, and she's been living in China now for 30 years. And the great thing about her is that she obviously speaks English. I don't speak Mandarin, unfortunately, but I have some amazing teachers that translate all of the classics. And she's been training under Dr. Feng, who is a Jing Feng master, and this is a classical herbal system that I know. And so she's a lineage holder in multiple lineages as well. So I trained with her, and she's the one that kind of taught me Batsa really. And the reason why I really learned Batsa in the first place was to help in clinic. I wanted to help my patients when I wasn't really getting the success that I wanted in clinic. And looking sometimes at the birth chart, you see things that may be difficult to do with just needles. So that's how I started getting interested in Batsa, and then realized that it's such a powerful tool. And if I can help people kind of have an insight into this kind of blueprint of their destiny and of their life and of their personality, I can help remediate things from a different perspective. So that's kind of why I got into Batsa. So it's yeah, it's an interesting story how I got there and everything like this, but it's a beautiful system of astrology. It's very intricate and yeah, love it.
Hmm. Beautiful. That's one of those things that I find so interesting about your journey as well, because this isn't the only system of magic that you, or, you know, spirituality adjacent topics that you practice. Like when you and I met in person for the first time over a decade ago at this point, like you were doing all kinds of different things, including you and I started doing a lot of like Greek magical pyre stuff, which is great because you're actually Greek, so you read it too.
Yeah.
Like you've been helpful with sending me really cool like Saint Cyprian prayers in Greek and stuff like that, and we're having a good time with that. But one of the things that like we were testing out like various other kinds of things. We were doing a lot of planetary magic. We were doing some Heptameron stuff, even some Key Solomon stuff lately. So like you and I kind of we do that thing where like we don't know how to explain what we actually do to each other, so we'll like pick a system that both of us can access and then do that together. And then as we kind of got closer, we realized, oh, Orthodox folk magic is the thing for both of us. We're both Orthodox, so
Yeah.
let's chat about that and get further and further into it. And then as time progressed, and we continued to do more magic together. Like we would drive out and go camping, and you'd come over, or I'd come over to your place. We'd do rituals together. You started introducing me to Chinese medicine, and you did my reading, and you started. And I remember when you were really like with it, finishing your degree originally in TCM, and you're explaining how this isn't even the way that you personally do it, the way that you're trained by your Qigong. This was something that you were doing actually for certification, which is still valuable knowledge, but it was more like it's standardized, right? And like what you were learning from your lineage was very specific to them as well. And so it was interesting to see you grow in that. And like I've been yelling at you for years, for years to like have a bit more confidence in what you're doing because you've made some really substantive changes in the health of myself and my friends and the people that we know mutually and your other clients and your patients in clinic. And it's really exciting that you bring always one an emphasis that like this is not about abandoning any particular system of medicine. Like Western medicine is still something you absolutely. I've seen you tell people like, go talk to a doctor and go get probably a prescription for an antibiotic. Like this is necessary. I've also seen you be like, let's look at your diet, but let's also make sure that you don't suddenly develop an eating disorder. Like we have to make sure that we're very gentle about this and that we're introducing things in a holistic way without any kind of body shame or negative feelings. And then there's also times when you've been like, okay, it's gonna take a very more aggressive approach, but let's also see where we can talk to your spirits about it so they can prime you for it. And I think that's what makes you a really like adept healer in many directions is that you don't only have approval from some very important masters, but you also have knowledge of how to talk to people's spirits. So like I remember you telling me stories of like when you'd be doing acupuncture on someone, but then seeing like ancestral traumas or seeing like negative parasitical spirits like in their shoulders or in their joints, and then you would try and like particularly address it. And then you talk to your one of your masters who'd be next to you, and they'd be like, "No, I see it too." And that's not something that's always spoken about necessarily, very openly. So I appreciate that you find a way to like always bring like your background in magic and sorcery into everything that you do, but also in realizing that this is exactly how it always was. It was not meant to be not acknowledged. It's just that standardized systems, right, in like ordinary schools that give you certifications are gonna prioritize certain things over others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you know, it was a shamanic practice originally. You know,
Mhm.
thousands of years ago, it was shaman who did these practices. The metaphysics, everything was connected. It's not, you know, Batsa, acupuncture, moxibustion, herbalism, all of these things were kind of under one umbrella, and a shaman would do it. So it was not a doctor, quote unquote.
Mhm.
You know, it's become more standardized now, more recently since the Cultural Revolution in China happened, really, because there was a lot of these lineages had to kind of go underground for protection purposes, right? Because there was a huge burning of the books and standardization that was put into place to make it more Western-like, meaning the medical system was turned into something that was codified in a different way and was more accepted by the West. So a lot of the kind of folk magic and some of these unspoken things were lost. And the only way you can kind of really learn that is direct from a lineage. Unfortunately, like it's not something that's a lot of it's been written down. It hasn't been kind of protected in that way. It's more so kind of word of mouth. And a lot of it's actually not even spoken. So the one lineage that I did train with the family lineage that that had healed me. And when I was in their clinic, a lot of it wasn't spoken. So it was kind of like very traditional. It was like, you got to follow everybody around. You are the youngest in the family. So you have to learn how to be part of the family. And what does that mean? It means cleaning toilets and making sure the clinic is clean and making sure the patients are coming in properly and making sure you're staying out of the way and all these little things that we think are not fun to do, but they teach you so much about everything, right? So, you do all that stuff and then you start to kind of observe how a patient is being treated. And then you have to start to, my Qigong would test me and see if I was actually able to identify where there was a blockage in the person's energy body, if I could see things on people and all this type of stuff. So this is like kind of the scrying aspect. That's not something that's really written down about. Like it's not talked about in that way, but it's something that people are doing. So especially the classical or classic trained healers, you'd say. So yeah, so it's definitely a lot of things that are kind of, you have to kind of directly learn them from a lineage. So I've been very fortunate to have that, to have those teachings come through and to have some amazing teachers that have taken the time to spend learning these things. So yeah.
Is it, am I correct in remembering that you were like the first non-Chinese person who was even initiated into that particular lineage of that family?
Yeah, so I was like, no, I was a second kind of one. But yeah, but this was the first time that they've expanded outside of their family. So this is the first generation that they've ever taken on students outside of the family. And my Qigong, when he agreed to do it, he agreed to take me on because he knew me. He knew me from when I was a teenager, and he obviously he sensed he understood me on a deep level because he healed me. And I think a spirit that was around their family lineage was the one that came and spoke to me and was like, you need to do this. You need to go learn how to do Chinese medicine. And obviously being Greek, that was like, what? How am I going to go learn Chinese medicine? This is so intense. I have to I don't even understand the language. How am I going to learn this? It's a completely different way of thinking, but I love to learn. So that was something that I was like, okay, I'll take the challenge on. And I'm currently actually practicing and learning Mandarin. It does take some time to do that. I'm lucky that I have Greek, and it's a pretty hard language anyway. So it's the first time they've kind of expanded outside of the family. And it was interesting as well because of that, it's not something they don't have a codified system. It's very much a family style training. It's like you have to learn how to be part of this family. And, my Qigong and my Sifu, it's like, it's my grandmaster, my grandfather, basically, and my father, So this is like, we say this, and that's how you act towards them. And, when it's time to sit down and do tea, the youngest. So I would be like, when I came into the clinic, I was the youngest one. I'd have to serve tea. This is like the proper way of doing things. And you have to make sure that you don't interrupt Qigong, and you're only speaking when you're being spoken to. It's very traditional. So that was interesting too, because I had some obviously understanding of certain things just culturally, because I'm Greek Orthodox, and we do have some cultural similarities in a sense. But there were some things that were kind of very different to me. It's very formal. There's bowing and the way things are given and handed over and gifts and all these types of things that I had to learn. And, these are like the little things that are never spoken of in magical traditions, I guess. And in traditions that you're going to learn in the lineages, those are not things that are spoken of. And people go and they think, oh yeah, I'm going to go join this cool lineage, and I'm going to learn all this really cool stuff. And then they have to, go sweep and mop, and they're like, why am I doing this? And you're constantly fighting yourself. And it's interesting because I would come home and I would say, oh my goodness, like I would almost like be fighting my ego and be like, what did I learn today? And then realizing that in some of these things that I was thinking that I wasn't really learning something, these mundane tasks in a sense were teaching me so much. So yeah, it's and just having to trust the process and really surrender to that, and trust that the master is guiding in the right way. And so that's the traditional style learning, right? So it's something that's lost. But I was really fortunate that I didn't have to go to China to get that type of training, and I was able to receive it here. They've been living here for a long time. Their family fled China when kind of the Communist Party took over. So they've been in multiple countries in North America and stuff, their family, and they landed here. So that was kind of a lucky thing. And my other teacher, Suzanne, who I learn my herbal, I hold Jingfeng lineage through there. So I practice classical herbalism as well. Yeah, she's been living in China for quite a while now, and she's a doctor and works in hospitals there, and she's been able to get direct lineage transmission through quite a few different masters there. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's pretty helpful as well. So pretty grateful.
Well, I know you'll be in China sooner than later, rather than later, in time as well, training with other people too. I think it's exciting that you're able to get so much of an education here in Canada. I think that one of the things that always strikes me is like, you know, when we've all been to your home, is just the wall of herbs with the pinyin, the Mandarin, as well as the English everywhere. And I
Mhm.
know you've studied herbs for a very long time, and herbs are really your passion. And it's interesting to see how that blends in with other practices that you hold. I think I really relate to what you were saying, because Key and I did a really nice episode with our Tata in Kimanda, who was, we talked a lot about what that kind of cultural framework is of chores and learning and being present, like being physically
Mhm.
present at a temple to learn things, and how often like the opportunity to learn is really what everyone's winding down and just having their tea or their coffee, and the elders start speaking with each other. And that's when you start to like learn a lot, as opposed to necessarily just like waiting for like a quote like time for a lesson, which is less intimate and less, and often, you know, what you expect it will be is completely changed by the time you get there.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
It's like I said, it's the expectation of what you're going in with. I tried to not go in with an expectation. I was
Hmm.
in also a clinical setting, so I was seeing multiple patients every single day
Mm.
with very, very progressed health concerns like cancers and
Mm.
tumors and all sorts of crazy things going on, right? So I just kind of had to be for the first year or so. I was a fly on the wall in a sense, you know, just kind of observing and really watching, trying to see what my master was doing, and yeah, it's you learn through that, and you then ask
Mhm.
questions, and then when you do come to a certain point, you're able to ask more questions and in a proper setting. So you know, if we're back in the office, I'd say, you know, Sigong, I have a question about this patient. And then if he wants to respond to me, then great. And then I would get that, and I'd, you know, frantically write it down to remember all the little details, to remember that if I saw a case like this again, what would happen. Um, yeah, so it's really interesting. And in terms of the astrology and the Batsa, when I started reading charts and starting learning and understanding charts, I'd pull charts and we'd see patients and try to understand kind of where things were stemming from, and then how I could use the chart or the energy of the chart, and how I could actually treat the patient based on kind of the energetics that were presented in their chart as well. So it's interesting. And yeah, it's a fun game too. You know, my Sigong and my Sifu would test me, you know, go
Mm.
take tongue and pulse of this person and then tell me their constitution. Tell me what element are they? Tell me what's their day master, you know, tell me
Mm.
what might appear in their chart if you were to pull their chart right now. So they wanted me to kind of identify these things without even having seen something. So that was
Mhm.
always a fun game we'd play all the time. So it was kind of like, tell me about their constitution. And when I say constitution, it's basically kind of their lineage, their ancestors, and where certain things come from. And then you'd have to kind of scry into the person by having felt their pulse or looking at their tongue, and then see certain types of patterns or certain types of illnesses or certain types of personality traits. Where do they stem from? It comes from the mother's side, it comes from the father's side, it comes from a generational thing. Is there something going on there? So we'd play this fun game all the time in clinic. So, and then I'd have to get better at it, right? And that was the testing, and I'd get tested every single day, multiple times. Go in there, tell me this. Okay. It's fun. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, it's kind of like how I learned Favomancy, how I learned like to read beans, which I am teaching you now.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a lot of tests of being like, okay, just from the way they land when before you start to group them into threes, and then like into three piles, and then grouping those into fours until you get your first row. What do you already get about what the question will be? what they want to hear, what they're hiding from you, like just from the initial throw. And it takes a long time to learn that. So it's definitely like I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm also reminded of the fact that, like, speaking of checking pulses, I think within the first 20 minutes of meeting Keith in person, like he visited, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna introduce you to a friend of mine, like who's really important to me. She's kind of like a big sister to me. Let's go to her house. And we went there, and within 20 minutes of seeing him in person, you had checked 3 different pulses, his tongue, and had him horizontal on your acupuncture table with his shirt off and like a hat on his stomach that you had like salt on, and then on top of the salt was like a shell, and on top of the shell was burning mugwort.
Yeah.
You're doing Moxibustion on him, and I was like,
Mhm.
I have never seen Key get so handled.
Yeah. I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. 10 needles and a bunch of burning herbs later, and I'm like, damn, I feel great.
But you
Yeah,
explained it to him the way you understood, okay, this guy's an occultist, let me talk to him like one, because you also know your magic and your sorcery. And you've taken classes from many similar people that I've taken classes from in different kinds of magic. So you were like, all right, cool. Like, this is what's going on. Like, like, you told him his personality to him. You were like, here's the things, here's what it comes from. This comes from your mother's side. This comes from your father's side. This health issue is this. And it's not going to manifest in you because of these reasons. But this thing, however, we can preamp like this. And I was like watching his eyes like grow. And he's like, as you know, he's the one who teaches scrying. So he was like, oh my God, like, I'm getting scryed. Like, this isn't just regular health stuff. And then immediately he was like, yes, ma'am. And like let you did a mox on him. And then, I mean, the proof is in the pudding for those of you who know Key in person.
Mhm.
yeah. I think that that's the most fun though. The most fun is treating occultists and people that understand that there's a deeper meaning to things. Because when I treat somebody that's like a regular person, I can't necessarily go that deep into explanations, or sometimes I see things, but you have to kind of also know when to say something and when not to say something. But it's always great and fun when someone is open and willing to receive information and you see something and you're able to actually communicate it and actually make an impact and help make their lives better in some way, right? So that's ultimately kind of the goal, right? Well, we can talk about Batsa.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
talked about a lot of things. Yeah, Batsa. So Batsa is such a beautiful system.
For those who have
It's
no
a
idea what the fuck it is, like we mentioned it's a kind of astrology. How would you explain it to someone who's never heard of it before?
So it's your birth chart in
Mhm.
Chinese astrology. It is based on the year, the month, the day, and the hour that you were born. And there's 2 different components to it. So it's called the 4 pillars of destiny, basically. So you have 4 pillars, which is again the year, the month, the day, and the hour. Those all make up kind of different aspects of your personality. And there's a top part called the 10 heavenly stems. So you have 10 heavenly stems. Those are based on the different energies. So the 5 elements. So if anybody doesn't know or familiar with the 5 elements, you have wood, fire, earth, metal, water. So those are the 5 elements in Chinese metaphysics. And then you also have the yin and yang aspect. So whether it is kind of this more masculine energy or more feminine energy. So you have those things, and that's all the 10 heavenly stems. And then you also have something called you have the 12 animals or the 12 branches. So the 12 branches are made up of the 12 animals. So the 12 animals came to be, so there's like a little funny story about that. I'll share that funny story. So the Jade Emperor, who was the ruler of heaven, basically decided he wanted to create this calendar based on different animals, and he wanted to name it based on these different animals. So he basically called a race, and these 12 animals were to cross a river, and then whoever was to finish first that's how they would name in succession the year. So he basically ran this race, and it's an interesting story because a lot of things happen during this race. So you have when the journey began, you have the rat and the ox. So the rat is known to be really clever and very resourceful. So the rat couldn't swim very well. So it persuaded the big ox to carry it across the river. So this was like kind of this clever kind of resourcefulness of the rat. So the rat finished first and the ox finished second based on this, because the rat was able to jump off and sprint to the finish line. And then you have the second animal that came, or so that's after that, you had the third animal that came, which was the tiger. So the brave tiger, obviously, tigers are really strong animals, swam, and there was lots of strong currents, but it was really determined, and it finished third. And then you have after that the rabbit, this agile rabbit. The rabbit basically found different stepping stones and was able to kind of cross this way and came in fourth place. And then you have the dragon. The dragon's an interesting one. So the dragon finished fifth place. But it's funny that the dragon finished fifth. It's like, well, why would the dragon finish fifth? Because it's a celestial animal, right? So it should have finished first. But the dragon stopped to bring rain to a village, and it helped the rabbit. So
I'm doing this shit for people every time, and they're so thankless. They're like, "Why are you late?
exactly.
I don't understand. Like, your Sfinga, like, work was supposed to start like half an hour ago, and like absolutely zero gratitude for why the hell I was." Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Yeah. So the dragon, you know, this is the typical dragon, wants to just help everybody else, right?
God, I'm
So,
such a martyr.
Dragon
exactly.
gang.
Yeah. Then you have the snake and the horse. So the snake, small and stealthy. It kind of hitched a ride on the horse, on the hoof of the horse. The horse was about to cross the finish line, and the snake startled it by kind of standing up. And so it takes the sixth place. The snake takes the sixth place, and then the horse would finish seventh. And then after that, you have the goat, the monkey, and the rooster. So these three animals were interesting. They actually built a raft together. So they're the team players. And the rooster found the raft, the goat cleared the path, and the monkey steered. And their teamwork brought them to the shore, where the goat finished 8th, the monkey 9th, and the rooster 10th. And then you'd have the animals that are considered to be more playful and carefree, which is the dog. So the dog is a very loyal animal, and it's an excellent swimmer, but it got distracted by playing in the water. So it finished the 11th place. And then the pig, also being very cheerful and carefree, stopped for food and a nap. So it decided it was going to just finish last, and it was completely fine. So from this, you have the birth of the zodiac, these 12 animals, these beautiful animals. And it's a kind of a funny, playful story that talks a little bit about the personalities of these different animals. So you have kind of these different groups. You have the playful and cheerful group. You have the team players, these sneaky kind of strong animals. And you also have these kind of other animals that are a little bit more resourceful and helpful. So kind of cool. So that's the 12 animals, and that makes up the stems. And so when you're looking at kind of the Batsa, you're looking at the stems themselves are they represent the persona and the external. They are the natural, kind of our natural evolution through life. So from birth, our growth, our decline, our death, this is all kind of what it represents on a more high level. So you'd say kind of it's the external, it's more of the yang energy. And then the branches, which are these animals, are more of the core of our internal being. So those kind of represent the internal aspects of ourself. And when you read a chart, the year is actually kind of the most external, meaning a lot of people actually, when they think of Chinese Batsa, if they've ever heard of Batsa, they'll say, oh, my year is this. Great. Actually, that doesn't make up the most of your personality. It's what people might see you if they don't really know you. So if, for example, you're looking at a politician or kind of somebody that you don't know very well, like a movie star or something like this, you would see their year. That's what you would see them to appear as. So for example, if they were a dragon, you'd see them as this kind of really shiny, majestic, kind of like powerful, also very kind of mysterious kind of creature, right? That's what you would see them as. But as you get closer and closer to the hour, that's where you see more of their internal self. So the month would represent more of kind of how you are with kind of colleagues in a work environment, something like this. So that's what people would see you as there. And then your day would be your actual personality, and that's your day master. And that's actually the most important part of the chart. So that's kind of who you really are. Everything is based in the chart around that one, the heavenly stems and the branches of that particular aspect of the chart. And then you have your hour, and your hour would be kind of the most internal aspect of the self. And that's usually not visible to most people. It's usually kind of what you feel internally. But most people won't see that about you. So there's all these different aspects in the chart, and they represent many different things. So the interactions between the day master and all of the energies in the other areas of the chart would also represent how you are with your lineage, how you do at work, if you're going to marry or not, if you will have children or not. Basically, you can see everybody's kind of destiny and blueprint. And then it gets even more complicated, which is really fun. So after you have these, could determine these 4 pillars and these 4 animals and these 4 aspects of the self, then you have how those things will interact and how they will either get along or not get along with 10 years, each 10-year pillar of someone's life. So that usually will be, your 10-year pillar will be something that kind of interacts with your main 4 pillars. And that's why in some cases, some people might have had like a really awful childhood, but then things get really better later on because the energies shift every 10 years. So you have a change of energy, and you then get kind of almost like adopted, or you get this adopted animal, this other energy, this other heavenly stem that will be also interacting with the chart. And then you also get affected by the year. So all of these things are interacting together. So it's kind of a really interesting system because you can read it very simply by just understanding the basic blueprint of the 4 pillars and understanding kind of your personality. But then you can also go and kind of zoom out and then go very complex, how it will affect you from every 10 years, how it'll affect you on a particular year, everything like this. So it's a really cool system. What I like about it as well is that based on the elements and the balancing of the elements themselves, you can look at a chart on how balanced a chart would be. So what do I mean by balanced? A chart that has a good mixture of elements would be something that's considered a little bit more balanced based on what's in the day master. So for example, if we're looking at the 5 elements where we have wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, those are the 5 elements in kind of a sequence, kind of if you were to draw them in a circle. And say, for example, the person's day master would be wood. So they're a wood element. I'm actually a wood element, so I can use myself as an example. So being a wood element, water would nourish me, fire would be something that I produce. So if those things are in good balance and they're working really well in the chart, I would probably have a pretty stable life, let's just say, based on just that information. Now, the complicated part becomes when you start to have things like an element missing completely. And how does that now interact with the main element? So if you have, for example, a wood element, but you don't have any earth, that would be kind of problematic because earth is the wealth element for this particular chart. So if there's no earth at all, that person would probably have really hard time making money. So that would not be considered a balanced chart. But how we can look at that is how can we remediate that and fix it, and how can we add more earth to this person's chart. So yeah, it's kind of a very complex system, but I can go into it a little bit more.
It's so funny because so many people, I think their interaction with Chinese astrology for the most part is like knowing their year. In the way that, like in Western astrology, people really identify with their particular solar sign, right? So, like if you're born in particular, oh, I'm an Aries or something like that, or I'm a Gemini or I'm a Pisces. But actually, it's your ascendant that has a lot more to do with sort of your everyday interactions with the world, and then also the way you're perceived. And then, and the same thing in here, right? Your year master is only one part of a much more complicated whole. Like your day master, in many ways, what highlights predominantly, as you were saying, and then you also have your month and your hour, and that doesn't even go into what goes on with the rest of your life as it progresses. So like I remember the first time I was looking at my chart with you and you were explaining the interaction, the shift that took place between, let's say, when I was 3 years old to 10 years later when I was 13. And then it keeps going there in these 10-year increments, which for other people might start at 2 and 12 and 22 and so on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's also certain, because nothing is innately positive or negative in kind of a Batsa chart. You'd have to look at it as how it interacts with the whole chart. So which is interesting to read it in this way. So for example, there are animals that would clash. Like certain animals don't get along with the other animals, right? So there's 3 different types of relationships that I look at that are looked at in the chart. So you have a harming relationship, an opposing relationship, and a punishing relationship. So these 3 kind of relationships are different animals that are interacting with each other. So the earthly branches that are interacting that are not getting along. And if you see these things show up in a chart, it would kind of make you see, okay, this person's going to have certain types of hardships. For example, if there's a harming relationship present, they would be probably really likely to injure themselves. This is something that, they can, physical harm basically is something that could happen. So this is the kind of person that might be super, super clumsy and cuts themselves all the time or something like this, right? Or ends up having lots of injuries or something. So this is a way that it could present. An opposing relationship would be a little bit different. So opposing is something that's actually stimulating, and it's usually hard, meaning you're going to be challenged to grow, but it's something that is going to show, it's going to make you evolve spiritually. So this is not a relationship that's necessarily a bad relationship, but it will be challenging. So that's an interesting kind of relationship to have in the chart. And I think you made a joke about it earlier, Key, that you were talking about double opposing.
Right.
So yeah, so when you have, this is a funny thing. So when you have like a double opposing show up in a chart and you have it all basically within your four pillars, this is a kind of a situation where the person's going to be constantly challenged to grow. And they will have to make choices to grow. And if they don't, the universe will kind of throw the cards up in the air, and whatever falls will fall, and things will randomly happen. So this is when you would have to coach someone to say, okay, you have these challenges that are going to be coming up. They're not necessarily bad things, but it will take energy from you to be constantly kind of learning and growing and evolving. So be aware that if you don't choose to do these things, the universe will choose for you, and that may not be what you want. So it's kind of a relationship that's there that is not bad. It just is. And then you have punishing relationships. A punishing relationship, you would say, is not something, there's nothing really good that comes out of a punishing relationship. It just kind of has bad luck, right? So in one of the punishing relationships is a dragon. Why does that make sense and why does that happen? It's because you can't really have two dragons in the same space, right? When you have two dragons, they're going to compete to have the spotlight. So what ends up happening is one dragon is competing with the other dragon, and then there's always a fight happening, and it just, nothing really is good coming out of this. So and then you might see this come up in a chart, and that particular person might be having a really challenging life, right? They might have health issues that show up, or relationship issues, depending on where it shows up in the chart. And then, how do we fix that? Or how do we look at ways to kind of make it a little bit easier on them? I also have my teacher that did teach me Baza. She was talking about, in some cases, some of the most amazing people that have accomplished the most amazing things in life have had really challenging charts. So there's a thing about tigers not wanting to be around tigers, because, if you look at a tiger in nature, they're extremely independent, and they're an animal that doesn't want to be around another tiger, right? So unless they're mating. But in general, you have they're kind of independent. So when you have a chart that has multiple tigers in the chart, you're now going to have someone that is going to be constantly at odds with themselves, right? There's too much pull in different directions, and too independent and really strong-willed, and this kind of forward-moving force is too strong in this person. So she was talking about this one master in China who had a chart that had 4 tigers. Now, there's 2 different situations that might happen to this person. So this person could either literally have a life that absolutely sucks, that they can't make any decisions, they're just constantly being pulled in multiple directions. They maybe try to turn to substances and stuff like this and to try to drown it out. Or you have somebody that now becomes one of the greatest masters. So, this is the chart, right? The chart is actually considered a challenging chart, but it's how you use it. So the great thing about Baza is kind of knowing the blueprint. When you know your blueprint and you know kind of what the cards that you've been dealt are there, then you can work with those energies, and you can either manipulate them or change them or move forward with them in a way where you can actually help yourself get better and evolve, and also prevent other things from happening. So it's interesting. I love reading charts because there's never 2 charts that are the same. So it's kind of a cool thing to read. You learn a lot about people, and also just kind of how these energies interact with each other, and they're constantly speaking, right? These animals are very much alive and real, and they have a story to tell in each person. And the manifestation of that particular energy in that person will be different for each person. So it's kind of cool.
And how each person like experiences each year, right? As like the year animal changes. So like
Yeah.
you're like even like a dragon year can be tough on people with dragons in their chart because it's just an
Yeah,
additional form, right?
absolutely. So this year particularly, it's a dragon year. And for anybody that had dragon in their chart, it will be a more challenging year for them. Meaning the advice that I gave to those who may have dragon in their chart and have a dragon year is that the dragon year is a bigger energy and you must yield to the dragon year energy, meaning don't overly challenge, right? So for example, if the dragon was to appear in your month pillar, it would be don't overly challenge people at work. Just kind of try to stay cool, because the dragon energy of the year is going to want to take the spotlight and is going to make the ultimate decisions. So your dragon needs to kind of just calm down a little bit. So this is kind of understanding kind of what's in your personal chart and then how that would interact with the specific year is always really helpful, because each year it changes and it will affect you in different ways. That's why we have some years where we go into them and we're like, wow, everything is so awesome. This is like such a lucky year for me. And then you have other years you're just like, this is an awful year. Nothing is going my way. Why isn't this working? Probably because of the interaction of the animals with in your chart and the particular year that's happening. So
Mhm. It's also really interesting how that function of the chart is not only predictive but prescriptive, where you can just see it coming down the road. If you're like, oh, this year we know it's going to be hard because of, to use the same example, this double dragon. So how do we preempt that? A, with just the knowledge that it's going to happen. B, maybe this person needs a certain behavior. Maybe they need a diet. Maybe they need to cultivate a certain thing. Maybe they need herbs. Maybe they need whatever else.
yeah, definitely. You can tell you can see things happening before they happen. For example, you might see a harming relationship that will come up. And at that point, you would say, okay, there's a harming relationship coming up, which means that you will have to we'd have to either distract that animal somehow. So give a talisman, and that's partly how and why a talisman would be used to either distract or add an energy that's needed in order to be able to balance that particular chart out for either the particular year or their actual natal chart, meaning their 4 pillars, or for their 10-year period. It's used in different ways, but it's either used to do that, or you can say to them, okay, you're approaching a particular period that's going to have a harming relationship that's going to show up. So you're going to have to do something yourself that's going to counteract that energy. So for example, my teacher said one of her teacher basically told her at one point she's going to have to bleed, which is it's kind of this harm, right? This harm kind of idea. She's going to have to bleed. And if she doesn't, something bad could happen to her, meaning she might get into a car accident or she might cut herself really badly, right? Because again, the universe will choose, right? So he suggested, why don't you just have a baby, right? If you choose to have a baby, you bleed, it solves the problem. She didn't want to do that. So she used a talisman to counteract this particular possible event that might show up, right? So this is an example of this. It's the same thing as if you have a double opposing showing up, or if you have a situation where you have 3 out of the 4 animals that will create that double opposing. So every single time you meet this additional animal, whether it be a year, a month, even a day, there's a possibility that something might go crazy. So once you know that information, you can then check and say, okay, I'm coming up to a year that is going to create a double opposing, and there's going to be another animal added into the mix in my chart that's going to cause this big kind of the deck of cards just get thrown up in the air and however they fall. So I'm now going to choose to do something big. So I'm going to choose to travel, or I'm going to choose to initiate into a lineage. I'm going to choose to do something quite large that's going to change myself.
Even like moving places where you live or starting a huge new commitment or hobby.
Exactly. So all of these things would be a conscious choice that you're making to counteract that energy. And so it's really powerful to know this information, because when you know this information, you can actually then preemptively kind of be almost like one step ahead of it, and then not have things just randomly happen. When I first learned about this and learned my chart, and I saw my chart, it was kind of like I had this like aha moment. I was like, oh wow, that completely makes sense now to me. Why every so often I have this and this and this happen, and that, you know, I have to maybe get ahead of this and make a choice in a different direction. So I actually have 3 out of the 4 opposing to make a double opposing. So I have 3 of the animals out of the 4. So when I meet this additional animal every so often, it would just crazy things would happen in my life. And I didn't know why. I was like, I'm just like really unlucky or sometimes really lucky. So it was like, it kind of however it went, right? So now that I know that, I just make that time be, hey, this is a really good time for me to travel. Or this is a really good time for me to go and initiate into a lineage or to do a very big working or something like this. Yeah, so I just kind of use that power in your advantage. It's all energy, right? The flow of the chart and the energy, how it interacts with the universal energy and the energy of if you get into it, into Batsa, you can also understand how it will interact with people around you as well. In China, it's very common for employers and for people that you might date to actually ask for your birth chart. So then that way they can look at your chart and see who you are. I had actually one woman here who that was what she did. She wanted to get to know me, and she's Chinese. And she said to me, what's your chart? So I said, okay, here's my chart. And it's not uncommon for this to be asked. Whereas like kind of in the West, if you ask for somebody's chart, they're looking at you like, are you going to do something that you shouldn't be doing to me? In China, it's completely normal. So she looked at my chart and she goes, oh, interesting. Okay. Interesting. Our energies work well together. And that was what she was looking for. She wanted to see if it would make sense for us to possibly work together. And that's how she did it. She looked at my chart. So it's kind of cool that it's used in that way. And it's super common. Everybody knows their Batsa chart in China. Like this is not an uncommon thing. Whereas kind of in the West, we don't always look at our astrology in the same way or into the same depth. A lot of people might know kind of what you said. They know the month they were born and, you know, oh, I am this particular zodiac, you know, I'm a Taurus, I am a Gemini, whatever it might be, right? But they don't necessarily look at their full astrology reading in depth. Whereas in China, this is actually used to make decisions, business partnerships, marriages, everything like this. People are actually paired up based on their charts. So it's kind of, it's interesting that it's used in that way. It's actually not just limited to people as well, which is kind of cool as well. So my teacher, when she taught us, one of the biggest things as well is you can actually pull a chart for a start of a business, right? To understand the energy of that particular business. So that day, that month, the same thing, right? So when you're anything that's being birthed into physical reality can have a chart and you can understand and read those energies. I recently did a chart for someone who did a very, very intense magical working to clear some generational things and pulled a chart on that and understood that chart based compared to their natal chart or their kind of when they were actually physically born. And it was very interesting, the energies, how they shifted and how some of these energies that came in were some of the things that were being asked for and called for. So yeah, it could be used in many different ways, Batsa, which is kind of cool.
So for the purposes of, if you look at someone's chart when they're in clinic, and you look for kind of these balances to confirm, diagnose whatever's happening in front of you. Is this kind of the similar thing where it's a combination of like maybe the birth chart and maybe the chart of the day that you're seeing them or what's going on in the current time?
Yeah, so there can be a lot of different things. What I usually do is in clinic, my first go-to, if I'm seeing somebody in person, I would obviously use tongue and pulse as well. That's giving me a real-time play of kind of the status of their internal organs, how the energy is flowing within their body and their energy body. Because acupuncture and the use of the kind of that medicine is very much an energetic medicine. So you do that, and then if you're looking at a chart to understand, it's usually to see if there's something that might either show up that hasn't been identified yet or to confirm. So for example, there might be someone that's missing a particular element in their chart, and that usually indicates that there might be some kind of health issue with that particular element. So if, for example, metal is not there, metal is associated with the lungs, and the large intestine. So those are the two kind of things that are associated with the metal element. So if those things are missing and if there's no metal in the chart, there might be a weakness or some kind of health issue might arise in the lungs, for example. So, it would be something to look at. And then you say, okay, this person might have these types of things that might happen. And it might actually even have been manifested by confirmation of the pulse in the tongue. So that's kind of how it can be used in clinic from like a more kind of prescriptive kind of aspect, and then kind of look at it and say, okay, this is how we can attack this. We can either use a talisman to balance, or I can actually use acupuncture and energy medicine and herbs, specific herbs, to be able to help fortify that particular area. So it can be used in many different ways. It's a very fluid system. So you can go from, using the chart itself and then understanding the day or the year and how that interacts with that particular individual's energy. Or you can say, okay, we can go from reading the person's energy body and then confirming that these things might show up in the chart. So it goes back and forth between the two.
Yeah, that verification step is really, really interesting. And just like how many checks and balances are built into the diagnosis, just really speaks to the system as a whole, and like how comprehensive and holistic it can be in actually helping people.
Yeah, it's interesting too. It's kind of like you think about it as, if you were to look at it from like a Western perspective, you'd say, okay, these are kind of almost like the genes, let's just say. Okay, these are the things that are kind of there. They're present. This is the blueprint of the person's personality, their life, their destiny in a sense. But it can express itself in different ways based on choices that they've made, paths that they've taken, training that they've done. So it's not uncommon to, for example, look at someone's birth chart that is a practitioner or somebody that actually practices energy medicine or practice cultivation. And when you look at their birth chart, it might not look anything like what you're actually seeing in that person, because you can change the chart. And that's something that I actually try to empower people a lot to understand, that this chart is not something that is permanent, meaning you wouldn't want to necessarily change your day master. Like, it's not something that we want to necessarily do. I don't want to do something to alter that specifically. But this can be completely changed in a sense. So by either doing practices of certain type of energetic practices like Qigong practice, certain meditations, doing magical workings, and working with spirits and ancestors, also then doing things like using talismans, you can actually completely transform the chart. It's not something that is so written in stone that it's not workable. And I know that some people look at it almost like look at their astrology chart and they're like, oh man, like, I don't even know if I want to have that information because I'm going to know when I'm going to possibly die and all this kind of stuff. But it's a really powerful tool, because if you know that something at a particular period of time, you have a weakness showing up, you can do things to actually cultivate yourself and prevent that from happening. Or you can actually do other things as well to counteract, right? So that's the interesting part about the Batsa. Like, it's not, I've seen it multiple times where I've had practitioners come in and they're actually they're a long time practitioner in Qigong practices, and they do magical practices as well. They have magical practices as well. And their chart, when you read it, you're like, oh, this doesn't look like anything that I've seen, right? Or you see it and you're saying, oh, well, this is why they're doing certain things as well, right? So it's an interesting confirmation on both ends.
It's amazing. And I love how Siddha can blend in as well with like ancestral practices or other kinds of remediations, that kind of thing. But speaking of remediations, I kind of want to talk to you about, because you do have a website, greendragonhealer.com, and it's you do consultations, so you will read someone's chart. It's like it's a meeting, right? So you meet with you over the internet, and then you'll talk to them and you'll walk them through the entire session of what you're seeing. And then you also touch on spirits and different ways to work with what's happening in your chart, some general advice here and there as well on other aspects of things that can come up. And of course, you can go deeper as well with successive sessions. But I know you do offer talismans for remediation. So I was wondering, maybe you could talk a little about what can somebody who would like to, whether it's for the holidays, gift themselves or a friend a reading, and
Mhm.
like what will that experience be like? What could they expect? And what happens during the hour? And if they want to purchase the option where for an extra $50 they can get the talisman, what does that do for them concretely? And what does it look like physically?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of the readings that I do are a birth chart reading. So I would read your four pillars, go into depth about kind of what that looks like, your day master, that's you kind of understand your day master, how those different energies interact with your day master. And it's based on the year, the month, the day, and the hour. So kind of going really into depth into there. And just depending on what I do is I actually try to balance I look at the elements and how they're interacting with each other. And if there's an element that's out of balance, or for example, if someone's coming and saying, I'm really struggling and I'm not making enough money. And I say, okay, great. This is something that we're challenged with. So I can actually add in the element that will help with money generation in the chart, for example. So what a talisman would do is it would help balance the chart out. Usually what it does is it's able to shift the direction enough for the person to be able to get them back on track, whether it be finances need to appear, or they're having a lot of bad luck at work, or they've always been having, health issues. All of that stuff will kind of usually get shifted. It's not uncommon to have like a talisman that shows up, and then we work with that, and it's like, oh, I'm actually feeling a lot better. I have way more energy. I started doing talismans initially more for health issues. And I was finding patients were getting more energy, or their health problem was actually starting to take a shift in a better direction. So what it is it's actually using the different animals and some of the elements that would be added in. So what I would do normally is I would give an actual like a drawing calligraphy. It would be something that they could either print physically. So I usually recommend to print it physically, and you have it around your kind of your workstation or wherever you kind of frequent all the time. Carry it on you, put it on your phone. What I usually do as well is I check in after a couple of weeks. So when I give them a talisman, 2 weeks later, I kind of check in and say, okay, what's shifted? What's going on? Are we having good positive changes? And then we can adjust, because it's all based on there's different energies that you can play with to kind of add certain things to a person or not, whether it be more money, whether it be attracting a relationship, whether it be better health. So all of these things can be added in, and it's usually based on kind of what I identify as the weaknesses or the kind of opportunities in the chart that I would identify, but also by talking to the person that I'm consulting with. So based on what they want as well. Because I've also had some people that I've consulted that have said to me, I really just want to make more money. And I say, okay, great. That does take energy. And if you are making more money, you might have some health consequences, meaning there's a possibility of burnout, or there's a possibility of you just being really tired. It doesn't matter. Okay, well, we can add a talisman, we can do a talisman for you, and then we'll see how that's going. And then we might have to dial it back, right? So these are all things that you can do with a talisman. The other thing that I usually suggest as well is, in some cases, I will tell the person to either use a specific element or work with certain energies within their home. That's usually feng shui based, but it would be something like a suggestion like this, where I would say, okay, you maybe make a shrine. It might be a suggestion of wearing a color, something like this as well. So usually all of those things are suggested if the person that's consulting decides to do a talisman. So there's like all of these kind of like additional kind of remedies to the chart. It's kind of to just help shift the chart in a different direction slightly.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like what you've shown me with feng shui with Flying Star, and being able to do that for your chart instead of just your home.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So feng shui is the kind of the spatial kind of it's kind of your environment in your physical space. So you can do things in your physical space to manipulate the energy of the space based on how it interacts with your chart. So all feng shui would be based on the birth chart anyways, because the directions that are favorable for a particular person are different. There's two different groups. There's a Western facing group and an Eastern facing group. So depending on those two things, you would be able to set up your environment. This is what it's all connected in Chinese kind of metaphysics. And so you have the feng shui aspect, and then you have the physical bazi with the bazi chart, which is kind of the blueprint or the personality and the kind of who that person really truly is. Then you also have something that is called Chi Men. Chi Men is a little bit different as well. It's kind of it's a little bit more martial. It would be like a particular day. So you'd be able to look at a particular day and say, oh, this is a really good day to sign a contract or something like this. So all of these systems kind of are interconnected. They all work together. And it's the same thing with the medical system as well. So all of the elements and all of these types of energies are all the same within the medical system, the Chinese medical system, which is kind of interesting as well. So it's a very complete picture. It's actually probably one of the most complete systems that I've encountered, being that there is the Chinese medicine, there's there's herbs, there's astrology, there's Feng Shui, which is the environment. There's Salt's not here, but we could go into it even more based on some of the Taoist practices and stuff like that. So it's like a very, very complete system. Everything is covered.
And I think God, so we talked a lot about like one of the ways that like all three of us really, like Salt, Key, and myself, honor our spirits is by trying to always learn more things. You have to understand, like, we first started learning with this stuff from you, and then like the three of us just started going off. Like we were reading everything we could on Chimen, on Batsa, on I think Key started getting really into Flying Star Feng Shui as well.
I did,
Considered for
yeah.
a while, like even signing up for a course.
After the chaos of a move and actually figuring out what my new place will look like, definitely hitting up this one Flying Star lineage that I became familiar with. Yeah, there's a ton of really interesting material and a lot of overlap there, as Maria was mentioning.
Yeah, Feng Shui is crazy. It's we had a situation, I think we were talking about it,
Yeah.
where my partner like we set up the house and he was pointed in the wrong direction. And this is before I actually really cared too much
Mhm.
about Feng Shui. And I was like, whatever, it's cool to know it. It's fun, but it's how much can it really do? And he was pointed in the wrong direction and he lost his job twice in that direction.
Yeah.
And I was like, something is wrong. Something is wrong. I don't know what it is. You're troubleshooting all of these things and we're doing magic and divinations and all this stuff. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. I pulled the chart up and I'm like, wrong direction. It's a bad direction.
Mhm.
And as soon as we moved his desk, he found a job. It was like, it was so instant, the results. And I was like, oh man, sometimes you troubleshoot all these things and you're thinking, oh, I did something wrong, or I didn't do an offering, or I didn't do this, or all this stuff. And it's something really silly. Feng Shui is powerful.
Mhm. There's a lot of stuff that can come up, like at least in the material that I'm familiar with, there's like three primary facing directions that you should just kind of observe at the change of whatever year or season that you're in, where one of them, if you're facing directly at it, it can create huge problems with wealth.
Hmm.
Essentially, Jupiter just completely removes its ability to affect your life. In fact, it's a little worse. You have directly offended the deities and spirits of essentially the sphere of Jupiter, to use the Western equivalent.
Yeah.
So they're like, "Fuck you." And then there's the other funny one that we accidentally encountered, Svinga, one of the last times I was over at your place, which is
Oh my God.
in certain directions, it's really inauspicious to be facing it or especially doing work and like stirring up the chi in that area. So like doing construction, doing renovation,
Yeah.
moving shit around. And we without really paying attention to what was going on, moved a pretty major appliance,
It was a
and
TV, okay?
yeah.
Because my dad was like, "Oh, Key's around. Great, let's do handyman shit." And so this happens every time. He's like, "Cool,
Mhm.
let's do this." And he wanted to move a bunch of furniture and then also have Key help him carry this massive TV into the space. And then everyone who touched the TV or like was part of moving it got sick, including my dad and Key. And like they
Mhm.
recovered quickly, but it was really, I mean, we made them some nice, coconut cauliflower curry, okay? It was great.
Mhm.
But like damn, if that was not funny. And then afterwards, we were like, oh, and this part of the house is like inauspicious for this, of course. And so we started doing remediations and it worked out nicely. But it does remind me
Mhm.
of that meme that's like, oh, your life is going to shit, don't blame yourself. Learn feng shui and blame the furniture. Which of course, which of course is not true. That's not the but it's funny.
Mhm.
Like and sometimes as an enjoyer of memes, I just want the funny.
Oh yeah, like there's a lot of crazy stuff that can happen, like especially when you start getting into some of the form stuff in conjunction with the compass, like realizing, oh, the particular drain in this part of the house might be where wealth aggregates, like where the
Mhm.
place of money is. So suddenly, if all of if water happens to be someone's wealth element, then all of a sudden they're getting fucked just as a function of the birth chart.
Yeah, definitely. The birth chart really does interact with the feng shui. That's why I'm saying it can become very complex. And the what you were referring to, the specific energy that shifts in the chart every year, it's called the tai shui. The tai shui is the general of the year, and that general moves around into different locations. And you never want to face the general. This is very bad.
Yeah.
And if you start to move things around where the general lays or where the general is that year, you are going to have a
Mhm.
big problem, for sure. So that's kind of, after understanding the bata of the person, I usually do tell people briefly their directions. Even though I'm not getting into a full feng shui reading, I do tell the person what their favorable directions are. So that way, if, for example, they're sleeping in a non-favorable direction, we can remediate, like we can fix that right away. Because, you don't want somebody sleeping or working in a non-favorable direction. This is just going to cause lots of issues. But then it can get very complicated because every year the general will move. So even if, for example, not this year, but the year before, the general laid in the east. So if you were facing east, it was not a good situation, even though east is a favorable direction for the east facing crew. But somebody that's like, oh well, I'm facing east because east is great and it's a good favored direction for me. You're now staring at the general all day long. You're probably going to have bad things happening, and they're like
Mhm.
wondering why nothing is working. And it's like, oh well, it's because you're not supposed to be facing the east. Turn your desk slightly southeast, and
Mhm.
then the next year the general moves to that direction, so you have to kind of shift it back. So this is all just kind of shifting around furniture and things in your house and just being a little bit more aware of it. But if you're
Mhm.
aware, the more you become aware of your own kind of energy and your own chart, you're able to actually work with this more easily. But it is very real, and it manifests instantly if you're doing it correctly and if you're not. So yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. I think there's a really beautiful holistic way of just kind of living in harmony with the world around you and with the spirits that inhabit it that is so evident within the system and how it's built that everything is constantly in flux and you're just working to find that good balance.
Yeah, definitely. It is that it you said it so perfectly. It's just trying to find our place within kind of the environment around us and how we interact with that environment, what our strengths, what our weaknesses are, how we can shift things for what we would like, and how we can do that. And I think that's why we all do and practice magic, to be able to have a little bit more control over what's around us. And that's why I really love this system because it is so beautifully put together. Where if you really start to understand how these energies work together, and again, once you understand the five elements and how the energy of the five of each element, that transfers throughout the entire system. Once you know the animals have their energy and their experience and their strengths and their weaknesses, and that kind of transfers again throughout the entire system. So all of these things are transferable. So once you know these things, you can use them in so many different ways. And yeah, it can get really interesting and fun.
Hmm. Well, that's super exciting. And Key, actually, you got an updated version of your Patsuna because you had one ages ago from Maria when she first started learning it from her teacher. And now
Mhm.
you got an updated one just the other month.
Oh my god, yeah. A fantastic reading. The information was both instantly actionable and, had longevity to it. benefits of following Maria's advice are always um, realized. And no, yeah, it was huge. And one of the things that I really, we mentioned earlier in this episode, and that I really want to highlight is that this was not just, putting the numbers in a computer and being like, okay, this is what it says. This is like, oh shit, I am being like way scried. Like, not even I'm being scried. Like my ancestors are being scried, and they're like, yo, what's going on here?
Which, a big compliment from a guy who teaches
Yeah.
scrying. But seriously, like we really appreciate your work. You put in a lot of it into this. It's been a joy to know you personally and see you go through all this and develop your skills. And as someone who's been like really our cheerleader in making the podcast for all three of us and has helped all three of us with health issues, with astrological issues, with all kinds of other things, like it's something that has, yeah, it's been amazing. We'll get Salt on for the next one when you're here to talk about metaphysics and medicine, because that's something where
Yeah.
both of you take a astrological perspective very strongly to those things too.
Yeah, well, I'm so proud of you guys with this podcast. It's so beautiful. I learned so much from you on a daily basis. So, I'm really, happy to be able to share what I learned from my teachers and what I've, been learning throughout my life and experiences. I was brought to this place in a very interesting way, and so it was kind of for me, it was a bit of a calling. It's not it wasn't something that I really was like, hey, I should just go like learn this cool system. It was more like, you have to learn the system. So I'm just happy to be able to share with others. And I think we're all here to kind of grow and evolve and get better and not getting too deep, but why are we really here on this planet, right? Is to evolve, and anything that we can do to get us closer to our ultimate form is good by me. So
I'm all about the ultimate life form. I'm all about Shred the Hedgehog. Let's fucking do this.
exactly.
Well, yeah, I think there's a huge blessing in being able to join the gods and the beautiful work of creation, right? And be able to actually continually manifest better futures for ourselves and for our loved ones. That's really been a message we want to communicate in this podcast, and reminding people that like magic is your legacy too. You can do it. You can engage with your spirits on your own terms, on their terms, learn to be part of the vibrant animistic life around you, and
Yeah.
cultivate better people. The friendship aspect is really important to this podcast. The three of us are best friends, and we love to have our myriad like friends and colleagues people really care about, and other people who are best friends to us like you on for it. So thank you so much for being on. We hope that for everyone listening, that if you're able to get a reading from Maria, or if you're able to sign up for one of her particular offerings, including getting remediation work done, that it brings not just blessings into your life, but like long-term important revelations and healing. This is something that's been huge for us because, I mean, frankly, having been on the call it was like a live reading, it was very impromptu, but like Marisa reading Key, and we were all in the same Discord call listening to this. It was nuts. Like it was really nuts because it not only keyed in on some really important things about you, but like actively gave you the tools to deal with a very important transition happening in your life right now. So, and that's like lifelong stuff, right? I mean, you can go back to it, certainly. You can keep getting clarifications, but it's something that's very serious about being able to actually move through like serious transitions in job and career, in life, and this location and everything like that, but then also knowing what your patterns are and what you have to work on and what you have to catch. That it's like Maria was saying, it's not necessarily negative inherently on its base, but it is something to watch and not allow it to like dominate you or hold your life hostage.
Yeah, totally. Like, as we joked about, just having that double opposing there is a very particular energy, but like, as part of that being identified, there's just, information, remedies, things to keep in mind, ways to live, medicines recommended. And yeah, like we were all genuinely blown away by how comprehensive it was, even just, being oh, let's just hop in a call and do this thing. Um, and yeah, I just really want to thank you for how well it worked. And B, just really shout out the amount of effort and time that you've put into cultivating your skill and ability in the system and bringing it to everyone else.
And it's so cool to have
Thank
you on
you.
here. I mean, we talk about the show because you'll be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I listened to your podcast when you picked me up for the gym," and then it's like, "Oh, but you're on it."
Yeah, thanks guys. Ultimately our lineages, our families, our ancestors have kind of, done things in a certain way, and we've been on a certain particular path, and we take a certain direction in life. The cool part about this is it kind of shows you what that looks like, and then you are able to make choices as to if you want to continue in that direction or if you want to change that direction. And it can be extremely healing because you're able to then take that power back and quite literally heal families forward and backwards. So Key, I'm really happy that in our reading we were able to kind of come to some, so that I was able to explain things to you that,
Mhm.
resonated and that were helpful. I try my best to make things really actionable and practical, because it's fun to know all these cool fun facts, but how do those really affect you specifically? That's what really matters, and that's what makes a difference. Otherwise, it's
Mhm.
just collecting another fun astrological reading, that it tells you cool things about who you might be, which we all really know, right? It's not just about that. It's about how those things can make a difference in your life and how you can use those energies to make the changes you want in all areas, right? So,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It was absolutely a delight. If you would like to get a reading, to check out your own Batsa, check out greendragonhealer.com and check out Maria's Instagram, instagram.com/greendragonhealer as well. She's an absolute fucking blast, as you've just heard, in a wealth of information. And just like I think I'm not gonna name names because I promised myself I wouldn't, but like some people in the spirituality, magic, occultism community kind of like develop this marketing personality where they sort of sound like a lifestyle coach. And like they wish they had the charisma that you have naturally, which is you actually care about people and are not just trying to like sell a product. Like you want it, you're like
Mhm.
I've seen you commit to clients where you just go all out to try and make sure that they're on the right path and that and you do so with a compassion that does not guilt them, that does not add shame to their habits, that does not compound particular inheritances from their ancestors, including living family, where there's particular negative patterns in play that can make it so that you feel unmotivated or undisciplined or that you have a hard time getting out of bed, but you approach it with a real love and excitement. And so that's something that I really, really appreciate about you, where it's not this like, here's my 10 easy steps or whatever like that. Because a lot of people, like both in Western and Eastern medicines, honestly start something like that after a little while, especially in astrology. So I really appreciate how grounded you are as like a practical folk practitioner, as an animist, as somebody who does like Eastern Orthodox magic and ancient magic from PGM as well, and also someone who's again dedicated more than 10 years now to the study of Chinese metaphysics. So thank you so much. I'm super excited for you. For those of you who are interested in this, please do check her out. It is a great gift to give yourself and your loved ones in this holiday season. Now, the time has come. Well, you're no stranger to this, Maria. You know, we have our Akashic records. What is yours? Because you are also like a music queen. Like, you've introduced me to so much fucking good music and you've taken me out clubbing. Like, you've been the person to get me interested in new genres. Like, I credit you with my ongoing love affair with like techno, EDM, house. But you've also like shown me some really cool meditative tracks as well. And I imagine that's where we're going today.
Yeah, so this is always a hard choice because there's so much good music out there,
Hmm.
But there's one track that I love to play in clinic. I find it's really impactful and it really hits deep for people, and it's Secret Garden Lotus. It's just a reminder for us to slow down and to just really enjoy the little things in life.
Is this what you were playing when everyone was at my house last month and then we had a person on the floor and you were doing acupuncture?
Yeah.
I love it. Meanwhile, we were in the kitchen preparing for Kia to come and we were making biscuits and gravy and we had star-shaped cookie cutters. They were making the biscuits into stars. because it was it was topical for what we were doing, I promise.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, mine is Folha de Jurema, specifically Zeek Zeek's Dragon Fruit Mix, because you introduced me to Zeek Zeek, great DJ, and this track is, I think, combines a little bit of how we all met, without going too deep into it. A little, a little ayahuasca, a little Brazilian esotericism and magic, a little techno. It's great.
A
Mhm.
little everything fun.
Yeah.
It's a good blend. Good
Mhm.
synthesis. And, my Akashic record for today will expose how much of a nerd that I am.
You say this
Like
every
nothing
5
else has.
episodes.
But is also the track that we had on the first time that I ever received acupuncture from Maria, which is Rhythm Amidst the Reeds by Yupeng Chen, which many of you might know from the Genshin Impact official soundtrack.
We did indeed play Genshin Impact music when you were getting acupuncture. That was
Yes, we
true.
did.
Oh my god. I love it. Well,
Um,
amazing. Amazing. Remember, we have an Akashic Records of the Frightful House playlist. It is as eclectic as our episodes, quite literally. But people love listening to it, which I really appreciate. So check out all our song recommendations, available at withcunningcommand.com/podcast. And to end off the license to depart for this episode, of course, another Key of Solomon baddie. This time, Key picked the literal consecration of the needle.
yeah, good old chapter 19 concerning the needle and other iron instruments as a little, homage to the incomparable needles of Maria.
Well, it's like the experience of Vision Quest because she put it in the right place.
Mhm.
Amazing. All right, Key, hitting us off.
I conjure thee, O needle, by God the Father Almighty, by the virtue of the heavens, of the stars, and of the angels who preside over them, by the virtue of the stones, herbs, and animals, by the virtue of hail, snow, and wind, that thou receivest such virtue, and thou mayest obtain without deceit the end which I desire in all things where I shall use thee. Through God, the Creator of the ages, and Emperor of the angels. Amen.
Go to the
Play.
fucking gym.